Hello everyone and welcome to the Property Podcast. This is episode 255 and this week I'm sure you've always asked many times the question, what would Rob and Rob do? Well, finally our egos have got the better of us and we've recorded a podcast around this very subject, but we're hoping it proves useful too.
Yeah, thank you for joining us on the Property Podcast. There are so many situations in life when you would definitely not want to do what Rob and Rob would do, believe me. But when it comes to property, hopefully we'll be able to help you out, and that's what we're going to be dedicating our main topic to this week. But we always make time as well for a news story and a resource of the week, which this time is going to save you some money. We do like those.
So before we get into all that good stuff, just a quick heads up that Rob and I do have a life outside the podcast. And if you'd like to know about that life, that business life, then you're in luck because we have a separate webinar to talk all things business. We like to keep it off the podcast. So if you'd like to find out about all the businesses and services we offer to help property investors, then you're in luck. You can go to thepropertyhub.net/discover where you can join us for a live webinar on Monday at 6 p.m. where we will run through all that good stuff and answer your questions about those services too, all live. So if you're interested in what we do outside the podcast, then get along to thepropertyhub.net/discover.
And also a quick reminder that if you were doing the smart thing and listening to the podcast on the day of release, then tonight is meetup night. Yep, the 1st of February means the first Thursday of the month, and the first Thursday of the month means that we've got meetups all over the place. Just go over to thepropertyhub.net/meetups, find your nearest, tell us you're coming, it's completely free, and kick off what is, let's face it, a pretty depressing month by making some friends and getting a good dose of property inspiration. So that's happening tonight, and thepropertyhub.net/meetups is the place to find out all the details.
Time for news story of the week now, and the headline is Purple Bricks could have 15% market share by 2022, according to Bank. And this news article, which you can find in our show notes, talks about how Purple Bricks, which says they currently market to 6% of all advertised homes that sell, could have that share boosted to 15% in a few years' time. Now, I question those numbers, whether they truly do have 6% of the market and whether they'll get to as much as 15% by then. But the trend is there and they are definitely growing and they are definitely moving in a direction. And it's not just Purple Bricks, it's the whole online model. And I think this is really interesting, Rob, because the trend is definitely going that way. High street agents, whether they be estate agents or letting agents, are really going to struggle to compete in this changing market. And it very much reminds me of travel agents where 10, 20 years ago, you'd see multiple travel agents on every high street. Like now, you'll see multiple estate agents and letting agents on every high street. But just like what happened to travel agents, I think it's going to happen to this industry too, where most will just disappear or be consolidated by those buying each other up, people exiting the market. I don't think this is something that could happen. I just think it's inevitable.
Yeah, I'm never quite sure how I feel about things like Purple Bricks and this whole model. Because on the one hand, I completely agree with everything that you've said. And it happened with travel agents. It seems logical that other markets will go the same way because the internet is disintermediating everything, basically. On the other hand, a property purchase or a property sale is such a massive transaction. It's probably the biggest you'll ever make. Would you be happy doing that purely online? I don't know. So I'm dubious about the models where it's all completely taking estate agents out the loop. Basically, it's just a service where they'll stick it online for you and you do the rest. I'm not sure if that's ever going to really take off. But I definitely think that a lot of the fat around the model will go away. So is there any need for estate agents and letting agents to be sitting in a shop front on the high street all day? No, absolutely not. They can go and sit in a cheaper location or they could go and sit at home. The way we make it work with yellow lettings, for example, is the parts that need to be done locally are done locally and everything else is centralised and done remotely because you don't need to have people on the high street doing all the paperwork. It just doesn't make any sense. So I don't know exactly how things are going to pan out. I don't think I really agree with that. I'm a bit dubious about that 15% market share claim, like you are, but the direction of travel is very clear. And if I was a traditional estate agent or letting agent, I would be getting a bit concerned right about now.
So for the main event, what would Rob and Rob do? Well, the reason we've done this is because we get asked loads of questions all the time. And yes, we have Ask Rob and Rob, which is awesome on a Tuesday. But throughout the years of doing this, and it has been years now, not just the podcast, but being in the old property game, we've seen a lot of things. but also we get asked a lot of things. And there's a theme of questions that seem to come up time and time again. So what we've done is we've got a collection of these questions together, put them all in one place, this episode, so we can answer them once and for all. Chances are you've probably had these questions in your head yourself, so it should prove very valuable. So let's listen to the first question from our lovely professional.
I don't even know where to start. I'm in so much debt. As a silly 20-something, I racked up crazy credit card bills. Now that I'm in my mid-30s, I'm slowly paying them off. I have around 15k to go. I'm earning more these days, which is good, but I feel like I'm really missing the boat when it comes to having my own place or buying an investment property. Do I keep paying the cards down, or do I do minimum repayments and save as hard as I can to try and get the deposit together?
You'd be surprised how common this question is. So many people go through the same journey. Financial immaturity in their late teens, 20s, and then they have the light bulb moment when they get to the 30s, some later, and go, oh crap, I need to do something to fix this mess. Now, the temptation for anybody who's interested in property, especially if you're listening to the podcast, if you're in this situation, you've clearly got a passion for property. So that temptation is to get going. Let's do the minimum payments and build up a deposit to start buying your first investment. And as much as I love property, I would caution against doing that in most circumstances, because the amount of interest you'll be paying on that debt will be really high in most cases, particularly if it's credit card debt. And you'd be far better off from a financial point of view to get that debt down and start then saving for your deposit. And there's two key reasons for this. One, if your debt levels, say they're on credit cards, are around 20%, the interest rate you're paying, then to get an ROI on property higher than 20% is near on impossible. It's really hard to do, particularly if you're new to buy-to-let. Yes, as you become more advanced and maybe do some development stuff, you can get close to that, but in the beginning, you're certainly not going to touch it. So actually, you'll still be behind. You'll be better off paying down that debt, because that will allow you to save more money, and then you can use that discipline of paying off those large chunks of debt to then paying in large chunks of savings to then be able to build your portfolio. And the second reason is, while you have debt and you are new to buy-to-let, the mortgage options you have open to you will be more restricted. I'm not saying you can't get a mortgage. There'll probably be a lender out there that will give you a mortgage, but it's certainly going to be a lot harder. So there's two reasons there, but the first one being the big reason for me.
That's a sensible answer, Rob, and I agree, but it's not a lot of fun, is it? Like, if you're excited about property, you're enthusiastic, and then the message is, well, you've got to wait another few years before you even back to zero potentially to start making an investment. It's correct advice, but it's not the kind of thing that people are going to want to hear. So is there anything that somebody in this position could be doing in the meantime to at least be building up some experience, or be having a bit more excitement than just paying down debt?
I understand, and it's a great point, Rob. It is the boring option, but most people won't do the boring option. It is the option that most people will ignore. They will either start saving for an investment and may never get there because they never learned the discipline of paying off their debt, or they'll just give up altogether because it seems like too much hard work. And that's why, for property investors, once you're on the property investment ladder, it's then easy to build up that portfolio, because it's so hard to get started in the beginning, and so many people won't bother to make the sacrifices that are needed to become a property investor. Being a property investor isn't a God-given right. It's not like everybody, I want to be a property investor, so why it should be easy and quick. No, it should be hard. Owning assets, the value of the properties shouldn't be easy, and it's not. And that's a good thing, because we should have to work hard to earn the right to own those properties. I'm not a get-rich-quick guru, neither are you, Rob, and you're not going to get that preaching here on the podcast. Other people will tell you what you want to hear, but you are going to hear it on this podcast. What we're going to give you is the hard truths, but the right truths.
I like the tough love. There was a phrase in there that I thought was really interesting. The person in the question asked about missing the boat, was what they said. This is something I get a lot when people email me. They'll sort of say, I'm in this position, I really want to get started, but am I missing the boat? Have I missed the boat? I'm kind of surprised by that, because I don't think that we've given the impression, I certainly hope we haven't, that the market is about to power ahead and you need to get in now or you'll miss out. Don't know how you feel, Rob, but to me, I can understand the impatience and that emotion, but that doesn't seem like a particular concern at this point in the cycle.
At most points of the cycle, Rob, if you're in property for the long term, which is all we ever preach, then you shouldn't be worried. Was yesterday the best time? Well, it was a better time than today. But will tomorrow be a bad time? No, probably not. I mean, you and I, we weren't invested in the early 90s. We could have said, oh, but we didn't get on that boat. Or the early 2000s, we didn't get on that boat either. You know, it was mid-2000s before we started building our portfolios. It was probably the worst time to get on the boat. But you know what? We're still here. And actually, we've built our portfolio because we've been patient, because we've been in this game for over a decade now. And that's what you use the word patience, Rob, but that's it. There is always a better time to buy. Whenever you buy, there always would have been a better time. But today is probably better than tomorrow. So don't worry about missing the boat. Just focus about the long term. Don't try and time the market. Don't try and be over clever. Yes, there are cycles, and yes, you can take advantage of them. But getting on that cycle in the first place is the most important thing to do. So let's have a listen to our next question.
I've managed to buy 2 rental properties and have used all of my capital. They bring in a few hundred a month each, but not enough for me to go full time. I'd like to get a couple more so that I can at least start to think about leaving work, but I have no savings or equity in the properties. How can I keep moving forward?
This is a really common question, and it's a frustrating one because it seems like you're in a good position. You're certainly in a better position than before you started at all. You've got a couple of properties, you've got money coming in, that's brilliant. And that is a really good thing. But at the same time, I understand the frustration because say that you've got £400 a month coming in. That's far better than not having £400 a month coming in, but it's not enough to change your life. It's not going to be enough for you to quit your job. So I completely understand the dilemma. So I'll start to answer this question by not answering the question and saying that the best thing to do is to avoid this situation in the first place. This is why we talk about strategy and goals so much. It's so important. If you've got a certain amount of money and that's it, that's all you're going to have, you're not going to be contributing large amounts each year, and you've got your goal, you know how much money you want to be bringing in on a monthly basis, you need to find a way of stretching your capital to get to that amount that you want. Now, that could be really easy. It could just be a case of buy X number of properties and you're done because you've got enough money to do that. It might be really hard. It might be that you need to pull all the money back out of each deal, do what we call recycling your cash, and so you can use it again, which is a really difficult thing to do. If you do that initial planning, then you'll avoid this situation where you go, great, I've got some money, I'll buy a property, brilliant, all done. Now what? I'm stuck and I'm starting again, basically.
So, Rob, that's what they should have done. But they're in this place now. They're in this situation. So what should they do?
Okay, so first thing I'd say is I've given you a bit of a lecture and this situation could have been avoided, but now you're in it. Don't beat yourself up. It is better than it was before because you've got this money coming in. So even if all you did was save up that rental income, then eventually that rental income will build to enough that will give you a deposit and you will be able to go again. So presumably you were doing some kind of saving to build up your deposit in the first place. So if you keep on doing that saving and you contribute this extra money, you'll get to that next one faster. Then once you've got your third, you'll add that rental income into the pot. So as time goes on, the snowball starts building and you've got more and more momentum to work with.
So great, you've got the momentum, but you've had to save, Rob, and we've touched on already, saving can be dull. Important, but can be dull. But this person's in a situation now where they have some assets and some experience. So can they be more creative moving forward from here to kickstart that momentum a little bit sooner?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things that they could do. So the first thing would be to try to maximize the value of the properties they've already got. So maybe there's a property that could be converted into an HMO. So it brings in more rental income. More rent means you get to build that snowball faster. Another possibility might be to extend a property or to refurbish it to increase its value, then borrow against that increased value. So you've then got a lump sum. So you're not stuck with just your savings. You could also pull some money out of the property and use that as the next deposit. If none of that is possible, the other thing to bear in mind is that you do at least now have experience, and that opens up joint ventures. Now, a lot of people say that joint ventures are a way to get started in property. I completely disagree. I don't think you should be going into business with someone else or using someone else's money if you don't really know what you're doing. If you've got skills to bring to the table and you're confident in that, then great. But if it's just that I want to get started in property, but I've got no money, I don't think joint venturing is the way to go. But in this situation, you have got some experience. You've bought a couple of properties. You're clearly doing all right because they're up and running and they're bringing in money. So that opens up the opportunity of finding somebody else who has got the money that you don't have but lack the experience that you now have and would be happy to get involved with you. So that's what I was saying earlier. It kind of feels frustrating and it feels like you're starting again, but you're not starting again. Because you have made a start, that opens up these opportunities that wouldn't have been there previously. Okay, so let's have a listen to our next situation, and there's some good news in this one.
Somehow I was very lucky and timed the market right. My property has had an increase of around 100k. I'd like to be a full-time landlord. What do I do? Sell my place? Release the equity? Do I put down another deposit to buy a place to live and invest the rest? Or invest it all and rent?
I'm going to make an assumption that your desire to be a full-time landlord is top. Everything else is secondary. So we can talk about the security of having your own home. We can talk about the risk of going full-time. But we're going to put those aside and just assume that becoming a full-time landlord is the dream and nothing shall stop you. So first, let's look at that property that you have. Now, if that 100k is what you can release in equity, then that's awesome. But if that is the case, then chances are you're going to be able to release even more money by selling it. Now, we've often talked about should you sell, should you hold property. But what the first thing you need to do is assess that current property. And let's say you're prepared to rent that property out and go and rent somewhere yourself. And somewhere cheaper as well. Because in the beginning, if you want this to happen, there are going to have to be some sacrifices. So moving into a place that's cheaper to run every month was probably step one. Now, if you rent this property out and it's in a great rental area, then awesome, that's cash flow coming in. But chances are the property you've lived in is not in the greatest rental area and there are better places to invest. So, against the general advice we give, and remember, there's always exceptions, we said this, and this is one of those, I would sell that property if it's not in a great buy-to-let area, and then release even more equity from that property. So you may have over 100k to get invested. Now, to become a full-time landlord, you need an income that will support it. But being a full-time landlord, you've not said hands-off. An investor would be hands-off. They'd want the income, but without having to do the work and run around looking after that portfolio. But a landlord would be prepared to spend their time full-time on that portfolio. So I would start to look at strategies that are high-income producers, but also at the same time can be a time drain as well. But that's okay to you as a full-time landlord. So I would be looking at probably HMOs. And I would start off by scouring the country, building up my contacts, network and knowledge to find out where the best areas right now are for HMOs that offer the best return, but also have strong rental demand. It's great having a strong rental on paper, but you need a strong rental demand in reality as well. So make sure the demand of these areas stacks up to what the cash flows are telling you. Once you've done all that research, I would go down that route. Yes, you may be on a train a lot. Yes, you may be putting a lot of effort in, but that's part and parcel of being a full-time landlord. It is in the name. It's full-time. But you can achieve that goal. You can start to build up an income through HMOs that will give you a modest enough income to possibly become full-time. Now, with that over 100k that we've got, it may not give you quite the income you need to go full-time. But there's always a halfway house. People often will say, right, I want to go full-time or I want to work full-time. But there is this halfway house of doing a bit of part-time work to boost your income, maybe 2 days a week, and the rest of the week you've got to being a landlord. And as you then build up your income again over the years with your portfolio, you can drop those 2 days. So don't see it as all or nothing. There's that halfway house as well that most people fail to think about. Try and be a little bit more clever with your approach.
So Rob, anyone who's looking to build a portfolio quickly and get to this full-time position is almost certainly going to be using mortgages. And so mortgages need to be considered. And in this scenario, it sounds to me like something to watch out for is mortgageability, which might be adversely affected by having sold your own home.
Absolutely, Rob. And while it may not eliminate all options, it's going to vastly reduce them. And this is another advantage of keeping that part-time work going as well. You know, if you really want to get out of this and be a full-time landlord, dropping to a few days a week work is a nice starting point and that bridge to it. But it also brings that benefit of having that income coming in every month so you can still get mortgages. So it's an extra win. What I would say to anybody who's thinking, right, I'm going to crack on with this advice and get going, is speak to a mortgage advisor before you go on that journey to find out what your options are, to find out what type of income you need to demonstrate. Remember, 25k plus is the standard that most lenders will look for, but not all. Some will accept less. So find out your options. You don't want to be reliant on just one lender, because if it doesn't go well with them, then you're stuck. You want at least a few lenders open to you if you pursue this strategy. So before you embark on this exciting journey, speak to the professionals.
I think there's something really interesting in this scenario, because this episode's called What Would Rob and Rob Do? That is what I would do if I was in that situation. But that is making the assumption that being a full-time landlord is the main thing. It's that above all else. Someone else listening to this might be thinking, oh, well, that's great, but there's no way that I would sell my own home and I'd rent somewhere myself, because it's really important that I've got stability for my family, that my kids are in the right school, all that sort of thing. And I think it's worth bearing that in mind, because these what would you do questions, the reason we've stayed away from them so long is that it's never that straightforward. It's never as straightforward as here's how much money I've got, here's what I want to do. What would you do? Because we might do one thing, but that might be completely different from what you would want to do. You can't really separate out the numbers from the lifestyle, from the risk tolerance. So I guess what I'm saying is that for all of these are an answer. These are what we would do. Does that mean that it's what you should do? Not necessarily, but it's hopefully giving you an insight into how we think about these situations. Then you can adapt what we say based on your own preferences and what sounds good to you. All right, so it's review time once again. And Rob, I'm hoping that some lovely person has left us 5 stars and got something nice to say about us.
Oh, they have. 2 quick ones for you this week. Thank you to the following lovely people. First up is Petra. And Petra says, I'm planning on buying my first investment property, and I heard about the Property Hub podcast from a member of the Bigger Pockets Forum, which is in the USA. I'm so happy I finally found you. All the advice, guidance and tips there are absolutely unbelievable. So helpful. I'm totally addicted. I listen every day and every spare minute I have. Absolutely love you guys. Thanks so much, Petra. And another quick one from Rob's Prop. Thanks, guys, for a fantastic podcast. Great resource for inspiration while I'm saving for my first buy-to-let. 5 stars. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to leave us a review. Glad you're enjoying the show.
Okay, let's wrap up this week's episode, as is traditional, with a resource of the week. And I love resources that save money, and I especially love resources that save money without you having to really do anything. So this is pretty cool. This is a site called Pruvo, Pruvo. It's pruvo.net. You'll find the link in the show notes, which are at thepropertyhub.net/whatwould. And what Pruvo does is solve the problem of you booking a hotel room, then finding out nearer the time that it's gone down in price since you booked. Really annoying. So because I'm a bit tight, I often leave it till a bit later to see if the price has gone down, by which time sometimes the price has gone up or rooms aren't available and all that sort of thing. What Pruvo does is you book your hotel room whenever you want to, you forward the confirmation email to them, and then that's it. If the price stays as it is, nothing happens. If the price goes down though, they will email you so you can cancel and then rebook at the lower price. It's as easy as that. So simple, but by forwarding one email, you could easily save a fair bit of cash. So I'm really looking forward to using this. That's pruvo.net.
Super cool app. And you know what else is super cool? Property Hub meetups. You've got one tonight. If you've not been to one yet, then get along. Or if you've not been to one for a while, tonight could be the night to get back on that property meeting wagon. They're all over the country and across the world. If you're keen to get along, go to thepropertyhub.net/meetups, where you can book your free ticket and find your closest venue. And remember, if you're keen to find out what we do outside of the podcast that helps property investors for our businesses, then you can find out through our live webinar on Monday at 6 p.m. If you're keen to grab your spot, then go to thepropertyhub.net/discovery. So plenty to do before we're back with Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday. And remember, the main podcast will of course be back on Thursday. So until then, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.